I think the other side of it that gets difficult, that's a more complicated question is, great, so you have a startup competition, you get these startups funded, but did they make it to a company? Are they really actually fundable? Are these companies actually getting to Series B and Series C? Are they getting to public? Are they getting to the fact that they have customers, and are they solving the problems? And the good news is Astroscale just went public in Japan, and they were a competitor at Startup Space. So we are having the effect we hope to have and continue to have. It's just the tail of space is long.
Welcome back to the SmallSat Revolution, powered by GomSpace. I'm your host, Frank Felker. I'm joined today by Rafferty Jackson. Rafferty is principal at Jack Industries and the host of the Startup Space competition coming up at Satellite 2025 here in Washington, D.C., coming in March 10th through 13th, right around the corner. Rafferty Jackson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be on your podcast. Thank you.
Appreciate your time very much, Rafferty, and I'm excited that you're here for a couple of reasons. One, to get the opportunity to speak with you, and also to learn more about the Startup Space competition. You have a lot of experience advising startups in a variety of industries, and I was hoping it'd be all right if we could start with you just giving us a synopsis of your background, other industries that you've worked with startups in, and how you happen to pivot to the space industry and maybe a company or two you've worked with there.
Well, I came up through Silicon Valley before the dot-com crash. So in mid-90s, I was in San Francisco, and the first tech company that I worked for was Microsoft, right in the heart of San Francisco and in Silicon Valley. I was seconded to a company called Web TV Networks, which was a subsidiary that Microsoft had bought. So I had a chance to be right in the mix from the mid-90s to 2007, all in technology. The next company that I went to was Macromedia. We were the guys who built the backbone of the front side of the internet. So Flash, Dreamweaver, all those technologies that made websites come alive in the early 2000s. And then I took a company public on the London Stock Exchange, Ubiquity Software. We created the SIP application server. So any voice over IP call you're doing, you're coming through on that technology. From there, I moved over to brands. So I joined VF Corporation, which owned the brands, the North Face, Eagle Creek, JanSport, and Reef. And I came into apparel and what you would call simple make compared to the hard technologies we were doing in Silicon Valley. But I joined an 80,000 person company instead of a 8-person company. And I learned a lot about the discipline of large workforces, global transportation of products. There's a really big difference between a bug fix you can do overnight and a product that has been designed poorly and is going to take 18 months to get here, and you're not going to discover that problem for 18 months. So I really learned the discipline of that design upfront. When you have those kinds of timelines, learned all about shipping cargo, flying cargo, can't make instant fixes. And then from there, I was recruited to join Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre at Beats by Dr. Dre. And I helped with the last 2 years of the build of Beats by Dr. Dre, taking it out globally, cleaning up the inside of the company from a corporation point of view to make sure if we had somebody come and try to acquire us, which Apple Music did once we launched Beats Music, we were clean in that acquisition and we got that deal done and we sold for $3.2 billion. And at that moment in time, I took a moment to breathe and say to myself, what do I want to do? And my friend Guillermo Sonline, who's been in the space industry a long time, asked me to think about coming over to space. He knew that I had told him when we were in law school together that my dad had worked on the Titan III for the Aerospace Corporation back in the early 60s, and that I had rockets all over my hallway. No family photos in the hallway, just pictures of rockets in the hallway that we would run up and down. Guillermo told me the one challenge he was really having was how terrible the space folks were at storytelling. That they were really technical people telling a very technical story to technical audiences, but they weren't breaking out to tell their story to the rest of us. So I started working on that problem and started working with all the deep tech founders. And I was welcomed into the world's first space accelerator, Seraphim, to work on a methodology of how to help deep tech storytellers tell the story to the rest of us so that we can understand the story And we can walk away with the moral of the story and retell it. We can tell anybody what we just learned in that 5-minute pitch. So that's what I've been working on since then. And I've ended up working with and coming into all the deep tech accelerators like, Seraphim Space Accelerator, as well as Techstars. And more importantly, here in America, working with the US DoD's accelerators, so Hyperspace Challenge. I'm on their council. And I work closely with some folks here in El Segundo at DTI and SpaceWorks. All of it with a goal of making sure that the story of this deep tech founder is getting out, so we understand what's the problem they're solving, what's the product they're making, and why is it important, and how are they going to do it. And that's how I found myself today. I'm now sitting on the Independent Investment Committee at Seraphim Space Venture Fund 2, or the second fund, well, actually the third fund, but this one's on pre-seed and seed. As well as helping advise directly on some of the companies that I really think are changing the world, like Earth iSpace, Zona Space Systems, and then helping with some advising like New Vista Capital, which they are folks that are more in aviation, but they really are helping us make changes in aviation that will help us with national security and defense. And of course, helping Jeffrey Hill with this amazing competition. I've been here since I've been here since day one. Day one, he and I met 10 years ago, and I've been helping him with this competition for the whole way through as a judge. And then recently, the last couple of years, as it got much bigger, we pivoted over for me to be the director.
Wow, I just don't even know where to start in response to that, Rafferty. I mean, that was incredible. And so many things that you said made me think of, another question I'd like to ask you. I hadn't heard the word macro media in 100 years. And I used to use Dreamweaver to build websites and freehand to do graphics and that kind of stuff. One thing that you said that really struck me, and it's a similar challenge that I face, which is trying to help engineers, scientists, and technologists tell their story. I'm sure you would agree that Albert Einstein had almost as much genius in communication as he did in physics. And one of the reasons we still know who he is today is because of his ability to communicate these complex theories and, E equals MC squared, even though we probably don't really know what that means. We can recite it from memory. And a quick question I would ask you is, do you get pushback from the engineers, from the physicists, from the scientists, when you say, we need to break this down into what's the problem, what's your unique solution, how do we communicate that? Do they resist your attempts to help them do a better job telling their own story?
I don't think resist is the right word. I think if I were in their shoes, I'd be very wary, because they've been rewarded their entire life through a style of communication that is technical feature set battles, right? My paper is better than your paper, and let me tell you why. My experiment is better designed than your experiment, and let me tell you why. This solution, that's how they've been rewarded. To all of a sudden have somebody show up and say, oh, no, you've got to throw that all out and do it another way. I would resist that, right? So what I've built is an introduction to storytelling where I explain to them how the brain works. So I've done in doing this work at Seraphim, and then now bringing it out to anybody that's in deep tech that I can get my hands on, how the brain works, how it developed, right? So going way back in time to talk about how we developed communication. The brain craves story, and it craves story because that was the original life and death communication technique, right? That was how we said, our village must leave this riverside when it becomes spring because we will get flooded. Much easier to storytell that the gods every February have a battle, and in that battle there are so many tears, and we have to move to the highland to make sure we're not in the way of the battle. Much easier to motivate people than it is to say it's going to flood, because it's easy to say, I don't think it's going to flood. If you're a newcomer, right? So the story being told as a moral story, a big story, a vision story, helps everybody pick up and leave that river and move up to higher ground when the spring floods come. That's how the brain developed. And then when I explained to them, as some storytelling, I'd take them through Beats by Dr. Dre and how we did what we did, a 3 billion sale in only 6 years. But I also tell them the story of Dr. Bose, the founder of the Bose Corporation. He was a scientist. And I tell how his story was throughout his company, and it's equally as successful as Beats. Totally different company, different point of view, making the same products, headphones in that one category, right? Mm-hmm. And then I take them through their problems. So deep tech storytellers have 2 problems that they can't cure. They can't fix it. They can't do anything other than accept that they have it. And then I tell them how to get through those problems through the storytelling of once upon a time. So you set the stage for who you are. Then you set the stage for what's the problem, because that's the norm. The norm is the customer problem. What is the thing in the world today that is making you so angry and upset that you're going to start a company to eliminate it? That's the status quo. That's the and every day. The next sentence is your customer solution, right? Until one day you change the world with your solution. Your solution gets rid of that customer problem. Then you're going to tell me how you're going to sell it to the customers and how big is the market, because that has to do with the math for the venture capitalists. But at the end of the day, you're going to finish the story with, and then every day, and you're going to tell me the moral. And the moral is never, ever, ever the technical solution. That's a what. If it's got a SKU and a price tag, that's a what. The big question is the why, right? So we made a satellite that could detect methane. That's a what. We affected the planet. We saved the planet from climate change by removing methane emissions. That's a why, right? That makes people quit their jobs and come join you. That makes landlords, get ready to give you a lease that you don't have credit for, right? That's what gets somebody to say, okay, wait a minute, I want to hear this story. We've already invested in some solutions like this, but you're talking about it in how we think you need to talk about it to make the market really big. You're the person that sees how big this market could be, and that market might match my VC math to invest in you. So I do want to hear what you're having to say, even if we think methane detection has already been done. And that's how I get them through. If I have the time to teach, 0 resistance. If it's just meet this startup and talk to them, it doesn't go well, because I'm just one of 10,000 other people that have shown up to tell them they're not doing a good job, right? You have to have the whole context of how, yes, you've been rewarded for the technical talk, but now I want to teach you how to talk to everybody else. And I also want you to understand you've got some problems that are always going to hit you. You have such deep knowledge that we'll never have. And you can't expect me to. You always have to start at the once upon a time. You always have to start every single time at the very beginning.
And end with they lived happily ever after.
And give me that big moral. Because the only reason I'm going to retell the story is because you gave me the moral of the story. And I can turn to somebody. And so I run into you, Frank. And I say, Frank, I know that you're now, working with some investors who are interested in ESG. I don't really know what these guys were talking about. I'm not a space person, but I heard this guy tell the story about he can now detect methane. And because he's doing it from space, like the whole planet, and he's going to be able to figure out where it is. And then he's going to be able to tell those people to go fix it. Like, I know that's important to you guys. I don't remember anything else, but the name of the company was blah. You should look him up. Right now, I've become his army of a storyteller. Now I'm like, right? Shakespeare is long dead. And yet I can retell Romeo and Juliet pretty well. Right? That's what you need in your audience, that you as the founder aren't there and your audience is your army retelling the story.
That's just fabulous, Rafferty. I can't tell you. I'm going to have to just resist all the follow-on questions I want to ask. One thing you touched on, though, that I try to emphasize with space companies is one of your audiences is the labor force. And what you need to be thinking about is employer branding, why you want to come work for us, what our mission is, and what that whole story as well. And as you know, I'm telling preaching to the choir here, but it is the investors, it is the general interest public. It's a lot of different people, but you can't forget about the people you want to come work for you.
And the bankers and the landlords and everybody else that's involved. Only 1% of the companies that are created get venture capital. That's it. And it's actually even smaller than that when you break down that number. The entire,
I'm sure you're right.
Yeah, the entire rest of the world are doing startups through getting loans from the local bank, getting a grant from the SBA, getting a grant from,
Right.
university. All of that is communication with the rest of the world. And if you can get them on your mission, because you're giving them something to believe in, you're going to change the world and make this customer problem disappear, which is going to create new opportunities because you've eliminated a bottleneck. They want to be on that mission.
So well put. Thank you for that. Well, let's reel back into the, the startup space competition at Satellite 2025 coming up here shortly. You said you've been there since the beginning. Can you give us just a little background of how long the contest has been going on, how many people have competed, and maybe share a success story or two?
Well, it's 9 years, so this marks 9 years. Next year will be 10 years, so we're going to have some special stuff planned for the 10-year anniversary. I don't know the number, but we average 10 competitors per year, so it's at least 100. So we're at least 90. I think we're probably more at 100 because when it first started, it was a lot faster. It was a different style of pitch. And the judges were from industry. So we had CEOs, VPs, and it really ended up getting to be truly kind of a chaotic pitch competition. It's hard for the startups to know who they're talking to and what they're trying to do. And then the questions could get very, the business people would really get into the questions. So we ended up changing it. And it really became a true pitch competition in the sense that it's just the 5 minutes on stage when you do the pitch and the 5 minutes of questions you answer on that day. Nothing else. So if you were the world's greatest pitcher yesterday and today you didn't do well, today is the only thing that gets looked at by the judges. And then we changed the judges. The judges are all sitting on venture capital funds. So these are actually the decision makers that are sitting within this ecosystem, helping companies get with funding. So they've been looking at the actual vetted deals. They're doing the deal flow. And so for them, they get to show up and relax because this is not an investability pitch. They get to have fun because this is purely a pitch competition. So for example, the winner last year, TrustPoint, the judges rated obviously for them to win, but some of those same judges had already passed on their investing in them.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was such a great pitch, right? And then some of the other judges hadn't made a call in that, which way there's 3 or 4 people doing the same sort of business. It's actually navigation from a constellation. So I'm an advisor to Zona Space Systems, which is one of the first companies that's been working on. It's if you think of GPS as a public asset, it's off of the U.S. military satellite and it's free. But in exchange for free, it's okay. Google Maps is pretty good, but you're not going to have autonomous cars and robots working with a 5 meter, pretty close. Oops, I meant turn here, right? You need to have precision into millimeters. So those private constellations are going to bring that precision. Zona Space Systems is, like I said, who I advise. TrustPoint is a direct competitor. I selected TrustPoint to come to the stage because they had a great story. It's a story that needs to be told and heard, and they did a great job. So it's an actual pitch competition, and it's really fun and it's really exciting. It's changed from giving startups exposure to now startups getting a 5-minute pitch to their investors, but more importantly, their customers, their future partners, their future employees, potential somebody that's going to look at them and say, we need to go acquire that technology. Somebody in Japan saying, oh boy, we haven't even thought of this idea in Japan yet. We need to talk to them. So it's because it's a global competition. It's really exciting. It's really changed. It's become pretty much one of the hallmarks of the satellite show. Plus, it's fun. It's always fun, right? You watch a pitch and you think to yourself,
sounds like fun.
What could they have done differently? Gee, would I have said it that way? You really get a chance to kind of, in your mind, you get to participate too as the person that's, pitching, answering questions. And it's really fun to listen to the VCs ask questions because you can really hear they're the professionals at this, right? They hone right in on the weakness. Mm-hmm. Every single time they go right to the heart of the weakness of the company, which is what that founder needs to talk about, right? Because your weakness is your strength and your strength is your weakness. So it's really fun to hear exactly where they go, right? What made them all think, oh, wait, I need to know more about this.
I have made a lot of investor presentations. I was a co-founder and CEO of a .com back in the .com era, and got my butt kicked pretty strong. But it's a great exercise in learning how to communicate. And boy, yeah, they can be brutal, but they're not out to be brutal. They're certainly not looking to hurt someone's feelings. They're trying to help you get clarity on what your message is. And I think that's tremendous.
I think
Now,
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going
Please.
to say that observation, Frank, is because you did get your butt kicked, right?
Exactly right.
You now know the VCs aren't there to belittle you or to make you feel bad about yourself. They are panicked that you are sitting on top of a 10-time return company that could make their whole portfolio. And they want to make sure
you can't seem to spit it out.
And they don't want to be the people who missed it. So so they really do push hard, right? Because they're sort of trying to figure out, is it in there? And all you need is some coaching, right? That's what they're really trying to get at. In the competition in particular, these judges have been told quite directly by me, we already know you're the smartest people in the room because you've all seen all the deals and you've all been in this a long time. This is not the time to show us that. This is the time for the startup to shine. So ask the hard and important questions, but be mindful if you see struggle to help them exit out of that question so they can get their feet under them for the next question.
That's tremendous. I mean, I've certainly heard about coaching the entrepreneurs, never heard anybody coaching the investors before. That's great. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you run a good show there, Rafferty.
We're trying hard to make it really entertaining. We usually have almost 300 people each session, right, in the audience. So we want them to walk away and have had, a good time, especially at this kind of a conference. To be candid, Frank, some of the discussions we have are very difficult. You'll sit through a room where the best and brightest on, debris removal will be, in pain, talking about how difficult it is and how big the problem is and how far away they are from solving it. It's nice to come to the competition because there's so much hope, right? It's just a room full of hopeful people trying to bring their vision alive, with investors that are hopeful they're going to find great ideas that they can put, their customers' money into. And then in the audience, hopeful customers looking for solutions, hopeful partners. And I think that side of it makes it feel, can balance out some of the other panels you might have watched where, your heart starts to get a little wrenched on how complex and hard some of these problems are that we need to solve.
That's great. And you mentioned one thing, how many people will be in attendance. I guess we better show up early if we want to get a seat.
You have to show up early to get a seat. Absolutely. It is always standing room only. We are in the Unveiled Theater, which is on the exhibit floor, and it's an open space. So you can sidle right in. You can come in late. It's not a problem. There's no closed door that you have to walk into. But if you want a seat, I do recommend you get there around 10:30 and at least put your jacket on the chair because but as the competition starts, 11 to 12 is the first panel, and then 1 to 2, it fills up.
Great. I will be there.
Yay!
I'm looking forward to it. All right. Now, let's talk. You and I had discussed that it wouldn't be fair to speak of just 1 or 2 or 3 of the competitors at this year's show. And instead, we talk about applications. And we both have had this experience of the sort of observing the evolution of the space industry, where it started out with, rockets and satellites and cubes and this and that. And now it's really evolving into precise applications of this technology to problems here on Earth. And so just to speak generically of some of the solution sets that the competitors have, one has to do with human beings in space and their difficulties with disorientation and vertigo and that kind of thing. What can you talk about just in general, what you're seeing? I'm not sure healthcare is the right way to put it, but human interface with space. What sort of applications are you seeing developing?
for me, the most exciting by far is the fact that we're going to be able to do experiments in space on the pharmaceutical, life science, biotech side of the world. So what we're seeing is that because we can now take payloads to no gravity or microgravity, we're able to grow crystals and all sorts of other chemistry with no gravity affecting it in ways that are unimaginable for advancing drug treatments here. So imagine instead of a 20-year cycle to get to an important drug, we could get it down to 5 years. Because you're in no gravity, the experiments act so differently. They grow faster. You're going to get winners and losers much faster. And now, because we are so far into the industry on infrastructure, we now have mass downloading. So downmassing means you're taking the payload and returning it to space through a capsule. So Varda,
returning it to Earth.
Sorry, returning it to Earth. Thank you. Returning it to Earth. So Varda Space was able to downmass a payload. In that payload is a drug that looks like it's going to be really important to the industry of that particular
that is awesome.
Company. And then in Europe, we have another downmass company coming online, Atmos. So we have the infrastructure starting to build where those companies will be delivering back down to Earth the results of those experiments that'll be able to be done now autonomously. So you can imagine, payloads that could go up in SpaceX on rideshare. They'd be these little factories that all they're going to do is have, 1,000 different ways to build a particular chemical and see what the chemistry is. Because you're in no gravity, they're going to get these amazing results. Then, Atmos will pick it up and deliver it back down to Earth. And that biotech company will be able to figure out how to solve it. You're talking about advancing drugs dramatically. So that to me is really exciting. I am also just excited that we do have the first time, we weren't even sure what to call the category of the person that's coming to the stage. We're like, is it human performance? Is it humans in space? But it's exciting to think about addressing the issues for people being in space, right? So we've talked about materials, composites, what will their suits look like? How will you be able to regenerate oxygen? So that general idea of people in space. But for me, when we talk about humans in space, by far, hands down, the downmassing of what will eventually be breakthrough drugs, breakthrough processes for human beings, all because scientists can now remove gravity as a factor. So they can focus on all the factors of drug development, but they no longer are constrained by gravity.
Unbelievable. That is just tremendous. I wasn't aware of that at all. I had heard about the growing crystals and drugs, but the downmassing I had not heard about at all. That's great.
It's exciting.
Now, how about, here's another one that maybe people hadn't thought about, is in-space manufacturing, robotically and elsewhere, other ways. That sounds like a big and growing application.
That is, I think that's going to be a breakout category over the next few years because a lot of money is going into ground robotics right now, right? With the AI revolution, we're seeing these humanoids that are being down here on Earth that are being invested on. All of that innovation. So making a machine be able to operate within a room on its own. And I mean operate like turn left, turn right, understand where it is. It's called, localization, navigation are the technical terms. All of that work is being done here right now and advancing so dramatically. All this money flowing into AI and robotics. Everything that you're seeing here will get translated to space. And when it gets translated to space, you are freeing up whole industries to leave the planet that shouldn't be here because they are not good for the planet. So if you think about silicon chip manufacturing, you could take that all up to space. So you are no longer using all that power and all that water. You are now using 724 solar power. You don't have to have the water because you don't need the cooling because you're in space and it's already cold. Right? So all these things could change. So I'm excited because all the robotics we're seeing, and especially now that AI is the hot, we're seeing billions of dollars flow. all of those innovations are coming into the space industry, and all of those innovations will be what takes us up and into space. And so you'll have autonomous robots, either, they won't be humanoid in space. You'll be able to make them very specific for the application that they're in, right? Because you don't have to take them into a human space, right? We don't have a human space in space. So you can just create it specific for the purpose, but then it can be doing all sorts of things. Even to the point of repairing, refueling, moving the debris, taking the debris, moving it to another area where you could take that debris and repurpose it through a furnace and make it into a metal that you'd be using in space. All of those big ideas of what could become infrastructure in space are all based on what's going to be these robotics. We have space robotics on the stage, definitely, which is exciting, but it's also exciting because we're seeing all these humanoid and AI ground investments, which will all transfer eventually up into the same robotics we need for space. Just radiation hardened.
That sounds great. You are having an effect on me that seldom happens, which is you're leaving me speechless. I just don't know.
My husband would say I talk too much, so
so he has no choice but to be speechless. Well, no, the expression I've heard is I don't know whether to go blind or wind my watch. I just don't know which way to turn. So we could go on and on about this, and I hope you and I'll have a chance to hang out some at the show and talk further. But there's a question I always like to ask my guests before we sign off, which is there a question I should have asked you that I haven't? Or is there a thought that's come to you that you'd like to share before we go?
I would say, I think there's a couple of questions maybe skeptically, if I was going to be a skeptical interviewer, like, don't we have enough startups in space? Like, doesn't it feel like everybody's like, aren't we already done with this? Are we already through the startup push? Isn't this the post-dot-com years, right? Or the dot-coms have already come down, and haven't we how many platforms do we need? How many constellations?
So, what would your response be to that?
And I think the reality is this is going to be a perpetual competition with perpetual startups coming in of 2 and 3 people, because the ideas that are winning are coming out of deep tech research. They're coming out of hard research, right? These are hard ideas to solve. So how do you solve wildfire detection? You're not going to, you and I, high in our dorm room eating pizza and creating the next iPhone app. That's not what this is, right? These are people who are engineers that are reading papers, that are getting access to information. And because all of that is changing, with Gen AI coming online, with the fact that we're starting to get into a highly divisive world on national security, you're starting to see information flow and money flow in ways that I think you're going to continue to see the hard ideas coming out of deep tech coming into the startup space. So this will always be an area that will always have great startups, coming in with people trying to figure out how to solve all these hard problems. So that's what I would say on that we're always going to have startup space because we have so many, interesting and hard ideas. I think the other side of it that gets difficult, that's a more complicated question, is great. So you have a startup competition, you get these startups funded, but did they make it to a company? Are they really actually fundable? Are these companies actually getting to Series B and Series C? Are they getting to public? Are they getting to the fact that they have customers and are they solving the problems? And the good news is Astroscale just went public in Japan, and they were a competitor at startup space. So we are having the effect we hope to have and continue to have. It's just the tail of space is long. These developments are 5, 7, 9 plus years. SpaceX is not profitable and it's 20 plus years. So that's another reason why I would say, if somebody was skeptical about really, are you launching companies off your stage? I would say fair to be skeptical. Something we're watching, and I think, our 10-year anniversary, I'm sure we'll be having those companies back that are the hallmark winners in our industries, like LeoLabs is another one. But there will always be startups coming into space because these are really difficult problems, and they will always be coming out of new composites. And so, we talk about composites as being such a breakthrough for aviation and for rocketry. Well, we haven't done composites development with no gravity yet, right? So that advancement we're seeing on the bio and pharma side, will we also see it on, for example, the composite side? Will you start to see a different technology coming through radiation hardening, because radiation hardening is designed, developed, and built in space with no gravity. So will it behave differently? So you'll still see all these innovations, even if it's for an old technology, because we're having all these other advancements that are happening. So we'll always be here. 10-year anniversary, I'm excited for. 20-year anniversary will be amazing.
It occurred to me a question I should have asked you, which is, how can we learn more about you, Rafferty, or reach out to you if we'd like you to help with our startup?
Oh, yeah, I'm always available. So I have my website, Jack Industries. It's either jack.industries or jackindustries.com. I'm also really active on LinkedIn. I'm always willing to help and pitch in for any of the deep tech founders that are trying to get their stories out. I firmly believe they're the that our hardest problems here on Earth are going to be solved by their solutions. So I want to get their solutions to the market. So I try to get everybody's idea to the market. Once it's in the market, I'm really selective with who I work with next. So that's why I'm only advising Earth iSpace and Zona Space over in the space industry side of it. And then on the autonomy side, Opteron Technologies. But I'm always looking to help. And then the other way that I'm active is because I've taken companies public, because I'm a lawyer. I join boards of directors because I have that expertise at having taken companies public and sold them, as well as sat on the comp committee and on the audit committee. And I'm always looking to join boards that are looking for partners to really take them all the way through the whole process and make them radically successful.
Rafferty Jackson, thank you so much for joining me today.
Frank, I am so excited to see you at the competition because I'm always looking for feedback. So I'm looking for you to sit in the audience and tell me what the competition could do better, because that's something that we really need. And with folks like you coming into our industry with a real comms background, which is something that the space industry has needed a long time, we're looking for that kind of feedback as well to make it even more entertaining and help our founders get to the stage and really make it really shine.
I'm happy to help in any way I can. Thanks again to Rafferty, and thank you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Frank Felker saying, I'll see you in space. The SmallSat Revolution podcast is powered by GomSpace, with platforms, components, systems, and services to meet every SmallSat requirement. GomSpace brings their innovative technologies and a flight heritage of over 2,000 successful deployments to your next mission. GomSpace, leading the SmallSat revolution. Learn more at GomSpace.com.